Welcome to our fun little study group for PP 5340, Introduction to Public Policy and Management. Today, we're digging into the required text, Race and Social Equity, a nervous area of government, specifically Chapter 4. We're going to be diagnosing a problem that silently stalls progress in so many organizations, that nervousness around race and social equity. This chapter gives us a really powerful framework for turning all that discomfort into real action.
So, the chapter kicks off with this quote from Eva Patterson, and man, does it set the stage. It's basically saying that the silence around race isn't just a lack of words, it's an active, damaging force. The whole framework we're about to explore is designed to diagnose and, well, treat this silence on an organizational level.
All right, here's our game plan for this study session. First, we're going to unpack why this is an organizational problem, not just you or me feeling awkward. Then, we'll get into the tools for actually diagnosing it and see how it pops up in everyday work. And finally, we'll walk through a three-step path to justice and talk about the huge role leadership plays in all this. Okay, let's dive right in. The chapter's big argument is that this nervousness around race isn't just a personal feeling. Nope, it's a systemic issue, something that's literally baked into an organization's culture. It's less about individual anxiety and way more about a collective organizational thing.
So, to really get this, we have to understand what we mean by culture. The book uses this great definition from Edgar Schein. It frames culture as this invisible force, the unwritten rules of the game that actually control behavior way more than any official rulebook. It's that shared, often unspoken sense of how we do things around here.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Schein breaks culture down into three layers. On the surface, you've got the artifacts, the stuff you can see and touch, like logos or how the office is set up. Then you've got the stated values, what's on the website or in the mission statement. But the real power, the real driver of behavior is deep down in the underlying assumptions. These are the invisible, taken for granted beliefs about how the world works. And that's usually where the nervousness lives.
So if this nervousness is an organizational symptom, how in the world do you diagnose it? It's not like you can just ask an organization how it's feeling. Well, the chapter gives us a specific tool for exactly this kind of examination.
And that tool is what's called a cultural audit. Honestly, you should think of it like an MRI for the organization. It's a systematic review that's designed to create a baseline, to see where the organization really stands on race and social equity, not just what it says in the mission statement.
This table just brilliantly lays out what that audit is looking for. It's basically a gap analysis, right? It compares what an organization says it is with what it actually does. So you might find a disconnect in what you see. Like, hey, the website has all these great diverse photos, but you comb through the annual reports and crickets. Not one mention of equity goals. Or you might see it in the leadership, where talking about equity is a huge priority for one person, but completely sporadic for everyone else.
Okay, so a cultural audit shows us where the gaps are. But how does that culture actually enforce itself day to day? Well, it socializes employees. It teaches them, usually without saying a word, what's really acceptable when it comes to talking about and acting on race and equity.
And the text makes this super crucial distinction between public boundaries and real boundaries. The public boundary, that's your job on paper. It's the explicit rules. But the real boundary, well, that's what you learn by watching who gets promoted and who gets ignored. It defines what you can actually do without getting that disapproval from your boss or even your coworkers.
Let me give you a really practical example. An employee who's staying inside the real boundaries might add some demographic data to a report. That's totally permissible, probably even seen as good work. But what if that same person suggests, hey, maybe we should analyze our own agency's policies for racial bias? Whoa. That often falls outside the line into what the chapter calls the nervous area of government.
So, here's the absolute key takeaway. Real, meaningful organizational change isn't just about writing new policies. It's about pushing those real boundaries outward. It's about making the work that was once considered nervous or too political into a legitimate, accepted, and even expected part of the job.
All right, so we've diagnosed the problem, we've seen how it shows up, so what's the treatment plan? How do we actually fix it? The chapter offers a really clear, actionable prescription.
The chapter puts this central question on the table. And the answer isn't just a single action or, another diversity training seminar. Instead, it's a powerful, very deliberate, three-step process. And this, right here, is the core treatment. The process starts with step 1, naming. You have to clearly and specifically identify that a practice is racially unjust. Then comes step 2, blaming, and this means finding the cause of that injustice within the agency's systems or policies. Finally, step 3 is claiming, which is all about taking responsibility to replace that bad practice and then monitoring the new one to make sure it's actually working.
Okay, we have to be absolutely crystal clear on this one. Blaming in this context is not personal. It is not about pointing fingers and calling individuals racist. It's about being a detective. It's about cause detection. Separating someone's personal intent from a policy's actual consequences and zeroing in on the systems and practices that need to change.
A prescription is pretty useless if no one actually administers the medicine, right? You can have the best plan in the world, but without action, it's just a piece of paper. This is where leadership becomes the absolute key to long-term organizational health.
Leaders are the ones who have to drive this change. Their job is to reframe inequity, to stop treating it like some unchangeable condition of the world and start treating it like a problem the organization has a duty to solve. And they do this by setting clear goals, by motivating people, like by actually linking this work to performance reviews and rewards, and crucially, by always focusing on the systems to keep that personal defensiveness we just talked about to a minimum.
And if there's one single thing that has to be in place for any of this to happen, it's this: a clear, unflinching understanding of the causes of the present unsatisfactory state. You just can't fix a problem if you don't truly understand its roots. That cultural audit, that data analysis, it all starts there.
So, let's end our study session with this takeaway question. Just think about it for our class. In a public agency you know, or when you can imagine, what's just one practice that's currently stuck in that nervous area that could be moved into the real boundaries of acceptable work? Thinking that through really gets to the heart of what it means to be a change agent in public policy and management.